Welcome to DEEPLIZARD. My name's Chris. In this episode, we're going to see how we can debug PyTorch source code using the Visual Studio Code IDE. So the first step, of course, is to get Visual Studio Code installed on your system. And I'm just going to assume for the sake of this video that you've already got that taken care of. So this is what Visual Studio Code looks like. I'm here in on the main tab, which is where we view our source code. And I've just made a sample program here that we're going to use to debug some PyTorch source code. We're going to debug the fashion MNIST dataset, which this actually lives in the Torch Vision package, but nonetheless, everything's going to be the same. So in order to debug any Python code, you need to install the Python debugging extension. And to do that, you just come down here to this icon here, extensions, and you click, and then you can search here for Python. Now, this particular one is very popular, so it's going to come up. It's going to be one of the first ones, and it's actually this one. So it's made by Microsoft, and that's because Visual Studio Code was created by Microsoft. And we can see here that it gives us debugging capabilities. So once we get the extension installed, then we're ready to come back to our program and actually debug it. So in order to debug a program, one of the first things you got to do is have a breakpoint. So I've set a breakpoint here. The way you do it is you just click next to the line number, and then you want to run your code in debug mode. So to do that, we're going to go to the debugger tab, and then up here at the top, you can click start debugging. Then when the program gets to the line where the breakpoint is, the program's execution will be paused at the breakpoint. So one of the cool things here that we can do is we can actually inspect the things that are going on. We can look at the data inside our program. So for example, the only data that we have so far in this program is a training set. So we can hover over this and we can kind of drill in and take a look at all the attributes of this particular object, and we can inspect the data. So that's really powerful when you're trying to understand how code works, as well as whenever you're trying to find bugs, or really just for understanding. I mean, the best way to understand what code is doing is by debugging it. And another thing that you can do, which is pretty cool, is you can come up here to this watch tab, and then you can add things that you want to watch. So suppose, for example, that we want to take a look at the train set. So we can type in train set here, and then we can inspect all of the particular attributes on this side. And then we can even drill in and get more narrow. So we can say that we want to look at the train set classes, and then this will show us the classes. Now this is very useful for whenever you're moving along through a program and you're stepping maybe through a for loop or something, and there's some variable that's getting updated. This will update in real time here. So that's extremely powerful when you're trying to watch code and, again, understand how it's working. So those are kind of like the main points that you need to know. Is number one, how to stop the program execution with a breakpoint. Number two, you need to know how to inspect the data inside the program, which is either to just hover over it, or my preference is to use this watch section where you can watch the values of your data change in real time. And then the last thing you need to be able to know how to do is to actually navigate. Once you've stopped the program execution, you can continue it, or you can take over manual control and navigate through the program's execution. So to do that, we have these particular controls right up here at the top. So these controls here, you can drag this little thing and move it around. But we have a few things here. We can continue the program execution, which just means that the program will continue on until either the execution completes or we hit another breakpoint. Then we can manually step forward by one line of code. So that's for this command here, we can step over whatever line of code we're on. We can say, go ahead and execute that particular line. Then the next one is step into. So the difference here is, instead of running a method, for example, suppose you're going to run a method. If you step over that method, it'll just execute that method, and then everything that happens beneath that call will happen behind the scenes, and then you'll get back control of the program after all of that code is ran. But if you say step into, then what you're going to do is you're going to follow the kind of chain of calls that are happening. So you'll be able to dive in deeper to see what's going on. And that's actually our goal or objective for this video, is to be able to do that with PyTorch code. So for example, the line that we're on here, if we say step into this line, then we will go into the fashionMnist class and it will show us what that code is doing to be able to return the first index. And the last thing up here is just step out. So if we go and we step into, and we're really down deep in a stack of calls, then we can say step out and we'll progressively move out of whatever call we're inside. And really the pro tip with these controls is to use the keyboard. So you typically, I'll put my fingers on like the F10 key and the F11, and I will be able to just know if I want to step in, then I go F11. If I want to step over, F10. And that'll give you a really fine-grained control over moving around through your program. Now, if you're a developer, clearly you know how to do this, but I'm assuming that a lot of people are coming to this new, and so definitely take advantage of this kind of way of moving through your program in the debugger. All right, so at this point, I find that many people can get here in the process. Now, the problem is there's an extra step that's a little bit tricky that you got to take before you can actually step into any kind of code that you've imported, aside from your own methods that you've created. So let me just show you what I mean. If we try to step into this call, it's just simply not going to work. It's going to execute the line and then give us back the results. So here we've got our image, we've got our label, and basically we're stuck. We're like, what's going on? How can we step into this piece of PyTorch code? Now, in order to do that, let me just stop this. So in order to actually be able to step into PyTorch code, we need to come up here to this section where we have a dropdown. Now, because Visual Studio Code supports multiple different programming languages, you may end up configuring, like here I use other things like PowerShell and Node, so I have configurations for that. But what you want to do is click on your Python configuration, and that's how you actually get going whenever you're debugging in Python. So if you have something else selected up here, you'll need to be able to click on your Python one, or I'm not sure, you may need to click add. So if you don't have a Python one, then click the add configuration. But to pull up your configuration file, you need to just click this add. So then Visual Studio Code has this configuration file. So it's just a JSON file with different run configurations. So what we want to do is get down to Python. And this line here is the issue that's stopping us from being able to step into PyTorch code. So in your configuration, you might not even have this line. So if you don't have it, you'll need to add it. And then we'll need to set the value of this particular attribute to false. So what we're saying is just my code, though we want that to be false because we want to be able to step into other code, i.e. the PyTorch code. All right, and that's it. Once you have this line changed, then you make sure to save the file. I have autosave configured on here, so basically it saves automatically when I make a change. So I'm good there. We can come back to this session or this program and start another debugging session. And now when I click the step into, we're actually stepped down into this particular class. Now you'll notice that we're in the getItem method, and that's because we passed in an index to get an item. And so we've dropped into this method. Now, one thing you may notice is that we're in the MNIST class. Well, the reason that we're in the MNIST class, or the MNIST, we're in the MNIST.py, which is where the MNIST class is defined. The reason that we're actually in this particular file is because if we just search for fashion, we see that the fashion MNIST dataset extends the MNIST dataset. So the only thing that the fashion MNIST dataset even does is just it has different class names, and then the resource locations are different. Really, the code that runs, like when we get an item, is the same code that runs for MNIST, and that's just how that's inheritance working there. So that since the fashion MNIST class extends the MNIST class, it inherits all of the code, like this code here, for example, the get item implementation. So here we can just step through this now. I'm going to use my keyboard. I'm going to press F10 to step over. So now we've just gotten an image and a label. Another name for label is target, if you didn't know. That's why it's called target there. And we get our transforms, and we return the image, the transformed image, if there are any transforms, and the target. All right. And so we have just debugged PyTorch source code. We can run this to get the program to complete. The only other thing that I think may be an issue is if you're running multiple environments, multiple Python environments on your system, then you'll need to choose the one where you have your PyTorch packages installed. So that's pretty easy. You just look down here, there's going to be a Python little section where you can click, and then if you have multiple environments, you can choose the correct one here. So I hope this helps you get up and running and debugging PyTorch source code. Now, from my experience and perspective, debugging code is the absolute best way to understand what's going on. So if you haven't jumped into this already, go ahead and make sure you get this set up. That way you can start debugging and better understanding what code is doing. And it doesn't take much code. You don't have to write a lot of code to actually get set up for this. So you can see here, this is just 15, 16 lines of code, and I'm able to start traversing through any kind of PyTorch stuff that I want. I just have to make some path to make a call into a PyTorch method, and then I'm off debugging. Now, one thing to note is that anytime that PyTorch code drops down into some C method, you're not going to be able to debug at that low of a level using this particular setup. So you are limited a little bit, but for the most part, you can pretty much learn a lot about how PyTorch works just by debugging the Python portions. If you didn't know, we're actually in Vietnam right now filming this video, and we have another channel called DEEPLIZARD Vlog where we document everything about our travels, and we also share a little bit more about ourselves. So if you want to connect with us in a new way, then go over there to DEEPLIZARD Vlog on YouTube and check it out. And also, if you haven't already, be sure to check out the DeepLizard HiveMind, where you can get exclusive perks and rewards. Thanks for contributing to Collective Intelligence. I'll see you in the next one.